877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Stumbling down the road with Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff as she carries stones, digs holes, and wheels her shovels on her way. This road is the real path. It is never easy and never clear, but always entertaining. This journey has not been a seated event, as Bridgette walks, runs, stumbles, carries, digs, drags, laughs, fights, sings, prays, dances, kicks, screams, and oftentimes falls.
Hey everybody, I'm going to assume we're close to the end of the promos and my show opening. And hey, it's Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show on Revolution Radio. freedomslips.com. Hold on one second. I've got to reconnect me guest. All right, Okay, anyway, you can find me at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. If you go there, look at schedule on the left-hand side, click schedule, click Studio A, and it will take you to the times and places of the Studio A show hosts. And you can go to the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you'll see a bee headed towards a flower, and that's me. Click on there, and you can find some information out and also contact information if you would like to contact me. Also, while you're there, please look at the funding link. So that you can figure out great ways to fund us. So hold on a second. And I have no idea what is going on. I'm trying to get Mr. Dr. Lenny Thyme on. And so I don't know, he keeps like either falling off or purposely disconnecting or anyway, just trying to get him back up on the show. Anyway, let's wait for him to get on. Anyway, I'll just kind of yak on for a few minutes. This week, I haven't really been producing a lot of videos on my YouTube channel lately, but I did post some. I've been kind of going through this feudal period. Okay, let's see if I can try to get him on anyway. Anyway, so my YouTube channel is Consciousness of Economics and Urban Farm Project. Let me see if I can get him back on. And I put a lot of videos and all kinds of different things up on there. But one of the things that I was talking about this week is product placement, prediction, and predictive programming. So if people are interested, they can go over there. There's part 1 and part 2. And so it's just a dialogue and discussion I've been having with people for probably like about the last year. And I'm still not getting Lenny on. So one of the themes that I was going to have Lenny on over was that, you know, he has a PhD in chemistry, and I've gone back to herbal school this summer. And one of the things that I really want to study is, you know, the chemistry of the plants, so that I understand, you know, more about how the chemistry of each individual herbal plants works with the body. I think Lenny is having all kinds of problems. It's now saying that he's unavailable. I'm going to just type in there. Okay, anyway. Says he's unavailable. Maybe he's like rebooting, or, you know, he's got some kind of technology issue that's going on. So anyway, one of the discussion that I wanted to have was kind of more related to chemistry, and you know, different kinds of things. One of the things I've been really interested in always is alternatives for pain relief, because obviously they're plants that, you know, were available for medicines for pain relief, obviously, way long before pharmaceutical drugs, because otherwise, how would they get the idea? And used to be that a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs had a relationship to, or an off-start or beginning in pharmaceutical drugs. So, anyway, so I've been that's kind of like the line that I've been going down. And I think that I have, let me go see if I can go find the chart. Okay, so I have no idea what's going on with Lenny, but let's try again. See if we can get him back on. I know that Skype has been, oh, Lenny?
Hello, am I here?
Finally. I've been like trying to get you on, and you keep falling off. It answers.
No, I realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Skype
is not behaving very nicely, and I could hear you, and then you cut out. Then it dropped the radio station, but I never could hear me or see that I was on.
Yeah, no, that's what was happening. And then it said you were unavailable at one point when I was trying to call you in. Yeah.
That's
anyway.
what I repeated. At that point, when Skype can't handle anything simple, is when you reboot your system and then pray that it works when it reboots and comes back.
Yeah.
All good.
All good. Yeah, you're here now. So I was just telling listeners that, you know, we were going to maybe even talk about herbal or plant chemistry, maybe some other chemistry. And I was just telling them about my, you know, videos I put up on my YouTube channel yesterday about product placement and prediction and predictive programming.
I thought it was funny when you called me and interrupted me listening to you talking on YouTube.
I know. That is pretty funny, huh?
Yeah, you don't often get to interrupt yourself where you truly do interrupt yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've just been thinking a lot about, you know, how everything, you know, we believe, you know, and just all the training, you know, and kind of like all the predictive programming that's out there. And
you almost have to untrain yourself to not believe, to be able to look at it objectively.
Yeah,
you know,
no. Yeah, to even just be able to like, you know, problem critical think, you know, does this make sense? Does it not make sense? Why do I keep doing this? it's that, it goes back to that statement. It would have been nice if Albert Einstein could have actually, expanded upon that quote, which is, you keep doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's it. How much predictive programming and the programming and systems that we are in. I mean, as long as we keep calling, red, we don't have our own language with the environment, the world around us, which should have been developed, from the moment that we were born.
See, that's where I think the problem really lies, is that humans have a language only spoken by human. They can't get that everything that has water is intelligent.
Yeah, well, you go back to like the native cultures and people, and they had songs and they had drum beats for everything, and it's how they communicated with the world around them.
It's all about vibration, and the key vibration is the vibration of water, and we're 70% water, and every critter that's alive is mostly water. Every plant that's alive is mostly water. And yet the biochemists insist on taking all the water out of the equation before they start to explain anything. That doesn't make any sense. But then again, the only sense we're interested in making at universities anymore is spelled CENTS.
Yeah. No, well, and that's the thing, I was over the last couple of weeks, I've really been thinking about, like, if, a lot of this stuff that's put into our environment as predictive programming, and it may be called history or science or whatever else. Well, who has the authority to call it a historical or a historical item? And who has the authority to call it science? And what it is that the predictive programming people who've programmed, probably for thousands and thousands of years, what we believe or see, feel. And this is why I'm kind of coming to this conclusion that the Mandela effect it's not really real. I think what it is that when people are living in their already predisposed predictive programming cycle, where they're like, oh, look, the sky is blue, there's clouds, there's this, and their predictive programming, I don't think that they can see the chemtrails. But when they start waking up to seeing what's really there, and they start to break some of that predictive programming, I think, and include that into their thinking. I think that's kind of like what some of these people are, calling the Mandela effect. But I think it's that they're just really starting to see things as they really are, not how their minds have been trained to actually see them.
I have a different explanation that seems to make more sense for me. And that is that in the information collection game, it was a while back that Amazon started collecting all the books in print and making copies of them online so that they could make sure that we didn't lose the knowledge of the past. And so by taking all these copies of the books, a lot of the books went out of print and disappeared off the shelves. So libraries started packing other things in the libraries and selling their books and not keeping as many books around. And if you had to do research, you went to the internet. And as long as the internet was saying the same thing that was in the books, you were fairly comfortable with the set of information. Now we go straight to the internet. We don't go to the books. And lo and behold, the information on the internet is different than the stuff that we remember. Why is that? Because they photoshopped the internet. And so our memories are perfectly good and perfectly clear, but when the conspiracy that controls the information puts out information counter to the stuff that we already know, and we're supposed to question it, when you go back and look it up in the books, does it say the same thing as the internet says?
Yeah. Or, yeah, I mean, but the same thing happens when people get an education in college too. They're taught to think a certain way, like, like you said, like science or chemistry, taking the water, out of the equation. And I think with history, things that they may date, may not be that old, or may have just been developed, that they've put into the internet or thinking or the consciousness of people. But yeah.
I think it's a little more insidious. I think coming out of World War II, there must have been going into World War II, there were two different streams of thought. And World War II allowed one to dominate over the other and rewrite the history. And they tried this big experiment of convincing people that family wasn't important. And so we went from extended families of hundreds of people down to the point where now the nuclear family is you, your immediate spouse, and the children living in the home. And so everybody's isolated from their support structure on their own, taking their own hero's journey. And we've been totally primed with the invention of movies, TV, even radio, and getting to the idea that Albert Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge, made up the idea of relativity to explain some things differently from the explanation. And Einstein was a smart man. He was a clerk in a patent office. He had access to information unfiltered, and he had to look at it to see if it worked right. It was not an education got in school. So why is it that now, whenever we hear Albert Einstein cited for the work of many, many, many different people in history, it's all on Einstein's shoulders because of this theory he made up out of thin air that's now taught as being biblical in our science textbooks? Sorry, time and space don't exist in the form that we were taught it, but as long as we're in an Einsteinian universe, we have to take time and space as a given, and that creates a box that limits us very greatly.
Yeah. No, I look at the same thing with medicine, and about the same time, probably, somewhere in World War II is when the AMA, really started taking over the United States and the thinking of what medicine was. And at that time, they were attacking and arresting all the people, alternative stuff, that had herbal medicines that were, curing cancer at that time. So I think you're right about World War II is when all of it I think all of it's been kind of sideways for a long time, even longer than that. But I think that the real deception, I think, in the United States probably did start across the board with everything about World War II.
Yeah, just look at one person in history that you know well, Wilhelm Steiner. And how long did it take you to find out stuff about Steiner that if you had learned as a child would have made your life completely easier?
Oh, 100%. Just having a relationship and understanding. There's so many things that I've learned from studying Rudolf Steiner and going to the Steiner College that have just blown my mind totally. And this is the other part that's crazy about it, is that other people who study Steiner don't understand Steiner. Like we have a friend that professes like his grandfather was, friends with Steiner and, blah, 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 blah. But this person doesn't utilize any of Steiner's work in any of his agricultural work, which I think is like a huge mistake.
And that's a big part of the disinformation game also, is that anytime people start getting relevant that have been disappeared from the past, they name something else after them and make you believe that they weren't who they were. Just look at the name Tesla. What does Tesla imply to most people? A car?
Yeah, no, that's totally true.
Nikolai Tesla was the guy Einstein pointed to when he was asked how it felt to be the smartest man in the world. But the Einstein myth really came back to me when I watched the 2015 National Geographic specials called Genius about Albert Einstein. And they ran 5-hour-long episodes of young Einstein and followed it with 5 episodes of older Einstein and gave every propaganda story out there about Einstein, all in a nice little package. And you realize that for any person to do everything attributed to Einstein, there's only one other person with that work ethic that I can find in all of history. That's Shakespeare. And Shakespeare is known to be a compilation of various people, especially Francis Bacon. And so I'm looking around at stuff and looking at history and trying to figure out how the Renaissance could possibly have come out of the Dark Ages. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's the thing. That's what, like, my favorite theme song these days is which one of these things doesn't go together? Which one of these things doesn't belong? That they had on Sesame Street. Like
that could be a Mandela effect too, because I know the words differently from your words.
Yeah, no, the words are different from my words, but that's kind of like how I have adopted it.
Yeah. What I remember is one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah.
One of these things just doesn't belong. If you can tell which one is not like the other, oops, you're wrong. Hey, that's the call coming in from you to me on my computer.
Wow.
Is what is going on. It's 10:27. We've been on for 10 minutes. Now it says, are you there?
Yeah, well, that was the private messages I was trying to send you to see, what was going on. So they just came in like 13 minutes later on your Skype.
I have 2 devices open. I have Skype on the computer, but I don't keep it open. And the computer, which lives in a whole different world than the tablet, just got the Skype message. It means the 2 worlds are now separated by 14 and a half minutes. And a couple weeks ago, I had it measured at 4 minutes. But I'm convinced that there's 3 different worlds in play that have entirely different outcomes for the people who are awake on those worlds, and that we're all on the same world simultaneously, because time has to resolve itself to create a pathway for us to move forward. So we're at this wall of time that we can best describe from the movie Groundhog's Day, where Bill Murray comes in and he has the same day over and over and over again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are, wherever you may be, you're now in the new way on Steampunk Radio with 2 E's. I'm Dr. Lenny Thyme, and I welcome you to 2 hours of the most interesting radio you'll ever hear. Every single morning when we wake up. And so it's completely believable that we're in the movie Groundhog's Day as a plot, and we're going through that same day over and over and over until we figure out how to move time forward again. But somebody's invented time travel and has gone backward. And when you talk about things like Ingersoll Lockwood and the fact that in 1890 he wrote a book about Baron Trump and his adventures, and wrote another book a couple of years later about the last president, and that's the script that we're running now, all you have to do is go back into the literature and you can find every narrative for every script they're running, and they're running out of scripts. So what's going to happen? Hey, everybody, it's Jetsons time. We're going into space. And how do we have images of space? Well, we saw it on Star Trek and Star Wars and in The Men in Black. But those were all movies. They were fictions. How much were they fiction?
Well, that's one of my teachers that said to me once that that the fiction is real and the nonfiction is not real.
It's absolutely what I've been going by. And because I learned the chemistry the way I did it, by studying it honestly and actually learning it, I was not rewarded highly by the school system with straight A's, because to actually learn a topic, you can't master it well enough to regurgitate all the trivia they ask you on exams at universities. But the idea of knowing that trivia and how to get to it and how to reference it was always part of learning to get a higher degree. Nowadays, anybody can go to Google and look anything up and get an answer. But whether that answer is even close to correct, how many coins are we going to flip and how many heads do we want in a row? Can I flip 8 heads in a row? Absolutely. How often can I do it? Honestly? Wow, that's a good question, because you got 50% in the first flip, 25% chance that you'll get 2 heads in a row, a 12.5% chance that you'll get 3 heads in a row, and only a 6.5% chance of 4 heads in a row. I figure if it's anything less than 1 chance out of 10, it's not likely. So 4 coin flips and we're done with our game, and we're nowhere near 8. And yet every time something happens, when it works its way into all possibilities, that 8 heads in a row is one of those possibilities.
I remember when I was there on the land, and we were playing cribbage in the evenings, at the end of the day, and we would always I'd always pull that damn 6 of hearts. Then you started pulling it, and it was on the main pile. You just pick it out and put it on top. It always ended up playing like a major role. Remember when we were kind of going through that? 6 of hearts as being on the right path, on the right road.
Yep.
And so we took it as a sign, because it kept coming up over and over and over. It defied the odds, right?
Not only did it defy the odds, but even after we noticed it, which usually is good enough to stop something that's unusual, it kept going. But it's a different reality here in the land of Oz. And there certainly is a yellow brick road, but it's not paved in gold. And with a river running through it, it makes it a pretty unique place. But it also lives in multiple realities. And I've had many conversations with Grandmother Tree since you pointed out who she was to me in a way that I could make contact. And I've found a lot of other trees on the property that represent their species and sort of have a gift of gab as far as trees go. But trees don't say very much to humans, because humans can't slow our metabolism down to the pace where we get out to tree scale. But my friend and mentor Armando Busick had an idea that he called Tree Eye that was based on the limbic system. And he had 8 concepts that go from mass to void. And when I started applying that 64-day cycle, going from massing all the way to voiding, I found that helped me with my communications with the trees. It was their cycle. And so I think the trees are a fractal of humans, more intelligence, but no opposable thumbs and no ability to move. So they can only talk to each other, and they talk in frequencies so that if you catch the wind right, you can actually hear the trees talking to each other.
Yeah, I've noticed they talk to each other when they have leaves, and they talk to each other when the wind comes. They can moan and groan. And I noticed, well, that we know that they talk to each other through the mycelium and have a very strong relationship with the mycelium. And it's like the mycelium is like a conductor, in order for them to pass information and data and communicate.
Well, it's actually a biological exchange process. And the mycelium have a deal with the soil that the mycelium take care of pulling metals out of the soil, and the soil fluffs itself up with the holes that the metals not being there produce, so that the mycelium has place to grow. And here in Oregon, there's a mycelium in Eastern Oregon that is 40 miles wide, one mushroom. And so this exchange can work. There's another exchange where
so basically the trees or the mycelium for the trees is like a lymphatic system.
Absolutely, and it's feeding the trees metal in exchange for the roots bleeding sugars. So that provides the mycelium with sugar content that it can convert to underground mycelium, and the plant gets the metals. The plant then takes the metals up the tree, and when it has more metal on hand than it really needs, it bleeds it through the bark, and you start getting the lichens and the mosses and the things growing on the surface of the tree.
Yeah. That might be why, just kind of a thought, I'm just kind of, I like when we can have conversations about stuff. Anyway, so sorry for listeners, but hopefully you'll like the ride. No. All right. So
I'm trying to keep it simple.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is one of the things that I've done a lot of work and study on is things that we call psoriasis of the skin or eczema. And basically in anthroposophy medicine, and you're dealing with plant medicines, because we kind of use the same plant medicines that we would in biodynamic farming to make preparations to, increase microbial mass or whatever. But you use a lot of these same plants for health conditions. So say you were saying the tree, attracts, mosses and molds to help it effectively clear out the heavy metals. Is that what you said, like the leftover heavy metals? So when people I was just thinking about this because it's a molds. They're molds and funguses that have turned into a different type of plant-based material when they grow on the skin, and we will call them eczema or like psoriasis, right? But it's actually, it's plant. It's like the plant has grown, it's raised up on the skin, just like a moss or a mold or a fungus would grow on a tree, right?
Yes. And in fact, I would surmise that if you look at your arm and you see all those hairs that people have on their arm, that the hair is the primary mechanism for removing excess metals from humans. Just like the moss and that stuff works on the tree, but then the eczema is a secondary way of removing stuff that the hair's not equipped for. Stuff like aluminum, strontium, and barium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because also too, those things, the mold and fungus and stuff can change forms in the body and create roots and create like the base of a plant mass too, which later on turns into the cancer tumors that people have. So it's kind of interesting, like how it can play out on the inside and the outside, kind of an interesting kind of way. Yeah, and the other thing too, and a lot of the Abyssinians, I'm sorry, a lot of the Aborigine stories are people that have gone to do walkabouts by accident with them. One of the things that they traditionally do when they're way out in the outback is there'll be these fly swarms that come in, and they'll stand there completely nude, and basically the flies give them a bath. The flies take off all the excess skin. They clean the hair follicles, the hair, so they remove a lot of the excess stuff that we're sweating out through water or oils, or, that are on our bodies through dry skin. So I always think that's interesting, because it seems like traditionally ancient people, had like a symbiotic relationship with nature. So when the fly swarms come in, they would give them the food that the fly swarms needed. And then the flies, cleaned up their body. Even said in some of the stories that the flies would go in and even clean out all the waxes and stuff, as long as the person just stood there, because they'd had a relationship with these fly swarms for a long time. So they had a relationship.
What's interesting there, as you talk about that, is that in my past, I had a roommate that was a beekeeper, and he never, ever put on anything to work with bees. He would just go out there and work with the bees, show absolutely no fear, never get stung, do everything he had to, and the bees would swarm him, never a sting, never a bite. And I think it has to do with the frequency where he understood the bees. I think that human scale is a variable, and that humans are bees on bee scale. The bees think they're humans. They think everything circulates on them on their scale. Who knows what they call themselves? But every different species on the planet has an intelligence that is likened to human intelligence, some smarter, some dumber, but each in their own way based on the frequencies of water. And the water itself can talk to the brain, and the organic stuff that's contained in the DNA is water activated. The DNA then can flash light to itself across large spaces. And maybe the light that DNA flashes is the same thing as the twinkling of a star.
Yes, we just don't know, do we? It's good things to think about.
If we take Hermetic principles and know that as above, so below, the entire world becomes a giant Mobius strip. And after you've circumvented the world once and gotten all the way around that Mobius strip, which looks like a figure 8, then there's a twist. And if you were on the outside, now you're on the inside. And it's a whole different path. But it's the same path, because the inside and the outside of the Mobius strip are just like the two sides of the coin, heads and tails. And so which one you start on, maybe you got the charmed one first. Next time you're going to get strange. Maybe you got the strange one first. Next time we get charmed. But maybe we get 2 stranges in a row, or 3 stranges in a row. Maybe that's what we're going through right now, as we flip the coin of strange and charmed, and it's come up strange, and it's come up strange, and it's come up strange. What are the odds that it's going to come up strange the next time we flip the coin?
So there's this poem that kind of goes along with that kind of, you know what I mean? What's the likelihood of you pulling the strange on the 4th one, the odds?
It's 50%.
Yeah, so there's this really great kind of a poem, right? It's kind of a poem story. It's in a book called The Child Within, because back when I was like in my late teens and early 20s, it was all about, you got to do your inner child work, So I did. I went through the whole process, but in this book, it simplified it to this, and it's basically the same thing. It's called like the 5 phases of like human evolution or something like that. And so it says, stage 1, I was walking down the road. There was a big black hole in the road. I fell in. I couldn't see anything. I'm stuck. I can't get out. Number 2 stage, I was walking down the road and same road, and I fell in the big black hole, and I couldn't see anything. I didn't know where I was at. I'm stuck. I can't get out. Third stage, I was walking down the road. I fell the same road. I fell into the big black hole. I looked up. I saw a light. I'm stuck and I can't get out. Fourth stage, I'm walking down the same road. I fall into the big black hole. I look up. I see light. I climb out. Fifth stage, I was walking down. Fifth stage, I walked down a different road. So on the fifth time, once you hit that fourth time, you know, if you make it to the strange again, then you're definitely going to like flip it to something completely different after, at least by the fifth stage or the fifth toss or the fifth roll.
And you know, if you count in Fibonacci sequence from 1 to 5, it goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. If you count normal counting, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 steps down the road, you're at the same place no matter which system you're really paying attention to. How many people actually will do the same thing 5 times if it didn't work the first time?
A lot.
Yeah. People
Almost.
push it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things Esther Hicks always said, or, you know, was that, you know, to death do you croak. You know, you're going to do the same thing over and over again because your great grandmother did it, or your mother did it, or your aunt did it. And you really see this kind of stuff play out during the holidays. You know, you have people that are making the same, you know, Thanksgiving dish that, you know, their great grandmother made, you know, without variation or change, because this is part of, well, the predictive programming of family too, right? So there was this crazy story about that I read about this granddaughter who was making this potato dish, right, for the family for Thanksgiving. And the mom said, okay, if you're going to make it, you have to make it, you know, right. You have to make it exactly the way that great grandmother did it. And you have to take all the steps to do it. And so she's at the potato step and, you know, going through it, and they cut the, you know, sides of the potato off first. That's the first thing they do. And so she says to her mom, well, like, why don't we use just the whole potato? And why do we cut the ends off, you know, to make this dish? And her mom goes, well, I don't know. That's just how your great grandmother did it. That's how we all do it, right? This special potato just for Thanksgiving. And so the granddaughter was actually questioning. So the granddaughter actually calls, like, I don't know, her grandmother or aunt or something like that, and starts posing questions like, okay, well, why do we make this dish this way? Why are we chopping a lot of the ends off the potatoes that we're not using and we throw those away? Like, I don't really understand how, you know, it's a serious thing how the potatoes are cut. You know, why can't we just use the whole potato, put it in the dish? It's all good. And so all of her women in her family said, well, we don't know. We'll, you know, start asking people questions about why this has happened. Well, when it came down, the answer was that the great grandmother cut the potatoes the way that she did because she had a short pan. Yeah. Not because of any other reason. And so the granddaughter at that point was like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to use the whole potato because that's the most asinine, you know what I mean? You know, it almost becomes what do they call it? Where we, where, you know, these things that have been our families and all the predictive programming type stuff that we've been involved in for generations, even like a simple potato in a dish, it almost becomes, if you don't do it, it's like, you know, like bad mojo or juju. There's a word for that, where people become obsessed with
Karma, voodoo.
No, they just become obsessed of doing things certain ways because, you know, maybe bad energy or
ritual.
Oh, superstitions. It almost becomes superstitious, you know, in the way that we do things and keep doing them over and over again, and may have learned them from somebody else and never asked a question.
Yeah, but you know, in the same way, now when I boot up my computer, every time I boot up my computer, I use the same process because it works and I'm used to it working. So now if I miss the process and I don't have it set up right when I logged out, I have to log in twice so that I could set it up to have it the way I want it to log in. So it has become a ritual that I don't even think about it anymore. I just go ahead and set myself up when I log out to log in the next morning using the same ritual. And if I go through things twice, I can add things in between, like a reboot on the tablet or other things. And somehow I always manage to clear my system when it needs to be cleared. And so the ritual, the idea of doing things that work as long as they work, they only work as long as you believe they work. And as soon as somebody tells you, well, that won't work, if you believe them, you're stuck and then it no longer works. But if you don't, well, now you've got a new world to work with, because you don't have to believe what other people tell you unless you actually have experienced it for yourself.
Yeah, well, isn't that like the process of critical thinking? Taking what you've learned and then actually doing it and seeing if it works or not, and maybe trying something different. Are you there?
What, yeah,
oh,
what
I thought I lost you again.
What does a transaction broadcast error mean?
Transaction broadcast error?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Are you getting that?
Yep.
Well, this is the deal, is maybe it's from trying to set up the last link I did with you, call, where it kicked you off. So it keeps sending you things, but you're on at the same time. You're on my show, and it's all fine on this other, So there you go. We just had a parallel reality thing going on, right?
We do. And part of that parallel reality is linked to our mutual friend, Richard, because he's not in your reality and he's in my reality. And somehow those two realities got mixed to where he's in a third reality different from us. And you're in your reality and my reality. I'm in your reality and my reality. He's in each of our reality without being in our dual reality. So he really aged greatly in the couple months since I last saw him. And I don't know if that's him aging or me getting younger, but it really looked like the age difference between him and I had gone from we're about the same age to I'm a generation before he is. And that was a really weird feeling.
Yeah, when did you see him?
Last week. I went down to his house on Friday, a week ago yesterday, because my friend Bill, Bill, he dropped in and said, we're going to Richard's. And I said, what? He said, I tried to call you, but your phone didn't work. I said, what? I sent you an email message. I never look at my email anymore. But sure enough, something happened. I had him dial my phone and it rang right away. So my phone worked, but he wasn't capable of getting in touch with me to let me know I had an adventure to go to Richard's until it all happened spur of the moment. So I'm sure in one reality that didn't happen at all. And in the other reality, I got to see Richard in Richard's reality, which isn't in my reality anymore, but is in your reality, because I have a different Richard in my reality because he's morphed and the stage is set for the next reality. Reality sure is messing us up these days, isn't it? We don't know what to believe anymore.
Well, for me, it's kind of becoming a relief, not to have being allowed more myself, allowing myself to actually not have set belief systems about things, so that way I can kind of pay attention to, noticing. And, that's one of the things about Steiner's work. Well, a branch of Steiner's work, which is kind of the science-based, they call it like spiritual science, it's really actually awesome. It's phenomenology. And I took the course alongside with the biodynamic farming course at Steiner College. And one of the things it does is it opens you up to your interpretation. So you go through these different kinds of processes. It's basically based kind of on Goethe's work, where there's different stages of how you utilize the brain. Some is left hemisphere, some is right hemisphere. And then, through working with each specific, thing, you build your own kind of conclusions, your own spiritually science conclusions based on the practices, that were done. And so you use things like, drawing whatever it is that you're looking at. You do things that are, left hemisphere, which are more technical and detail oriented. For example, if you went through a course on leaves having been one of the most epic classes in phenomenology that I took. I had a phenomenology class once a month, I think, at Steiner College for like a year. But the tree one, so basically usually what happens is you show up to class, and so it really helps you to kind of see the world like differently. So you get to class, they say, okay, go out all over the property and pick yourself 5 leaves. No rhyme or reason, just pick the ones that you like. No collaborating, just go out and get the leaves that you like. So everybody searches out herbal leaves, tree leaves, all kinds of different leaves, grass leaves or whatever else, and they come back with their 5 leaves. And then you start the process of, sorting. So you put your leaves in an order, and then you work with a couple other people and you put your leaves together, and then you sort, you come together in a conclusion in different groups of how you want to sort them in the way that you want to sort them. Why are you sorting them in the way that you're sorting them, as you're including, their leaves into the assortment. And then there's this one part where, basically the whole class gets involved and everybody puts their leaves in, and then everybody has to talk about how to sort them, smaller to larger. Why is that? Color, how far you can see through the leaf. There's all kinds of different kinds of ways that you sort it. Then there's practices of actually, drawing your leaves and going outside and actually drawing them and what they look like when they're attached to wherever you harvest them from. And there's just all kinds of different processes that you go to so that you can actually have your own, set of belief systems based on the leaves, right? Without other people sort of being involved, some information, but not a lot. And cool things like standing on a chair. Everybody gets the chance to stand on a chair really high or a ladder. And then you drop your leaf, and then you get to see like how it plays out and has a relationship with wind. And so you take all the processes of the leaf and the relationship to where it came from, the relationship to you, the relationship to air. And then also one of the cool things we would do is we taped our leaves onto the windows just so that we could see how, you could see through them with light. So we would actually see their relationship to sunlight, right? Water, checking out their relationship to water. And then it helps you to kind of build your own, conclusions and understanding. And it's just about, showing up and being clear and, really taking a good look is what phenomenology really taught me. But it really transformed my view of reality on its head and changed, directly changed my relationship, to leaves and to plants, because you start to realize like, the leaves have photosynthesis just like a retina. And so when the light is out, and the light is in a certain way on those leaves and you're standing there, they can actually see you to some extent. So a lot of this stuff, you know, you start to draw these conclusions with the world around you, and you start to realize that it isn't anything minutely close to what you've been told it is, or even in school, what you've been educated to believe that it is.
Yeah, it is really important that we step back, look at everything that we thought we knew, and weigh it again for whether it's true or not. Hey, are we up to about break time?
I don't have a bottom of the hour break. You have to go all the way through. Do you need a break? I could probably find something.
No, we have gone all the way through. This is the...
we're getting ready for a break. Okay. So, all right, everybody, we're going to mute out, and the promos are going to play. We'll see you back in 4 minutes. Thanks, Lenny.
Right.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, all you good-looking people out there in Revolution Radio. This is Mario. I invite you to join me Thursdays at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other. It's a show about you, it's a show about me, but ultimately it's a show where we try to have a little bit of fun. We discuss important topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
From the astral realms to the physical plane, the halls of power to the walls of home, the multiverse to the innerverse, all will be haunted by the ghost in the machine. I am Steve Zerloff, the ghost in the machine. Mondays, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Studio B. Exclusively here on Revolution.Radio.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart.
Hey everybody,
what do I do now?
Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, host of
I took a
Stones
leap of
Digging
faith
Holes, and yes,
and tried
we're
a
in the second hour.
formula
and my
with
guest
hawthorn,
is
garlic,
Lenny
cayenne,
Thyme,
and more, called
and we are
Extendivite.
just talking
Herbs
about
have been used for thousands of years
there.
to keep us healthy.
Hold 1 minute.
If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right, so we're back. Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff and your host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. And you can find us at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And you can actually look at all kinds of different ways to actually fund us. I personally have advertising. I do a little advertising banner on our main page for my healthcare sessions online and in person. And yeah, so my guest is Dr. Lenny Thyme, and we've been kind of talking about all kinds of stuff. We've been all over the map. So yeah, so it's a really great show, pretty laid back today, super awesome. So Lenny, are you there?
I are here, I think.
It's so funny. My shows go by so fast. I was like, no, Lenny, it's not the half hour commercial. And you're like, no, it's the hour commercial. An hour is gone. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. People can find me on Steam.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
At Lenny Thyme, LennyThyme. We both publish at Out of Minds, OOM2.com. I also have the New Way radio show on Steampunk Radio, which airs at 10 in the morning Eastern, 7 a.m. my time on the East Coast, and that goes on Monday through Friday. And so I get the experience of being a radio talk show host, and it's a lot of fun. But I put out a new post on Steemit today, and I'm convinced that if we change our physics from what we were taught in school to cartoon physics, we will more understand what's been sold to us by photoshopping reality, because nothing is as we think. I'm 61 years old. I grew up in front of a television set. They were lying to people even before that. But if you look at the people who were disappeared, like Rudolf Steiner, Reich, Schauberger, Walter Russell, the more people I find who were disappeared, who were publishing works in the 1900 through 1940 area, the more I get a sense of what sort of innovations they're going to roll out in the next 3 years as they try and dump 100 years of progress on us in 3 years and convince us that it's because of all those geniuses in the corporate culture and not because they've been hiding all we know and teaching us space one television show at a time. But when I talked about the Men in Black earlier and the way they approach aliens and the Men in Black, they did it in such a way that they made it so that people wouldn't believe it. And, you know, we have some other myths that people learn to believe, then learn not to believe, then lose trust with the people who teach them because they were taught to believe nonsense. And we know that the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus both really do exist, and yet right now most people in the culture will deny that.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I do is periodically, if I have a little bit of extra money or I'm bored, I'll go to like a Goodwill or like, you know, a thrift store that has a really good book section, and I'll look through certain sections of books, and I'll periodically you'll find like some, you know, gems. You'll find stuff, you know, from like the 40s or 50s, you know, when people were still kind of producing, you know, writing that was still made you think, right? Brought something that, made your mind work, that, you think about. And a lot of just cooking books, that I found are pretty interesting, because they teach you things to do, like how to render lard, you know what I mean, from hunting or whatever else. I mean, things that, they would never, ever put in, like, a modern day cookbook. How to go kill that squirrel and what to, scrape out to render some lard. Because, even back in the old days, I mean, they made a lot of things from lard. They made soaps and, all kinds of different kinds of things, but, to reuse, and nowadays it's like you wouldn't even use lard in a soap. And if you go to the grocery store and get a bar of soap, soap is not like what it used to be. And I'm saying that in a way where, they've slowly also, by removing a lot of this information and giving us, whatever type of information they want us to believe, they've actually also taken away information on how we can be sustainable. Do you know what I mean? And how we can live, with the things around us.
Yeah, I find it interesting how I get onto trends way before it becomes trendy, because I learn something and I try it out, and then later on I've moved on, and then it becomes a trend, and I think, oh, okay. But I use glycerin soap exclusively, and I've used it for about 10 years. And now if I get a standard soap product, it just feels chemically. And I'm a chemist. The last thing I want to do is have anything feel chemically that I'm going to put on my body or skin. So I don't use antiperspirant, which is all loaded with aluminum anyway. I make my own toothpaste by mixing baking soda, salt, a little bit of water, or not water, but hydrogen peroxide, and then stirring it up with a silver spoon so that the peroxide works with the silver to put silver ions in. And you brush your teeth with that, and it just clears your mouth, cleans up everything on the surface with oxidation reduction chemistry. Plus, it's a pretty color blue because of the silver ion in it.
That's awesome. Also too, like somebody gave me, somebody I know sent me soap nuts. And those things are incredible. You like boil them, and then you render the soap, and basically you can wash your hair with it. You can clean your whole house. You can add more water to it, make it into like a spray. You could wash your dishes with it, your hair, your laundry, and everything else. It's like the total multi-purpose, soap, and it's from nuts. I mean, the thing is like you can make all this stuff yourself. And then, get away from buying whatever they're buying. And the thing is, they're buying, when you go to the store and whatever they label on there, they're lying to you anyway. So, I mean, the thing is, even with, you think you're spending your money and buying products, and you're looking at the labeling or whatever else, and you think you're being conscious about it. But the thing is, they're lying to you about what's in it from the labeling. And there's this great documentary called Stink. I recommend everyone watch it. It'll blow your lid off about what they don't put in. But I've been talking to people about labeling for 10 years, and that they don't if it's under 1%, they don't have to include it in the labeling. So for example, like mainstream ice cream can have up to 250 ingredients in it, but only like 10 are labeled, and you think it's all natural. And some of that stuff that's under 1% is kind of like, what is it, the polyethyl glyphate or whatever, which is like it's similar to, or it's part of the component of antifreeze. They put that kind of stuff in ice cream as well, that they don't, label it as. But like Lenny's talking about, you have like, if what you put in your toothpaste.
And it's very simple, and it has everything that's required, because the baking soda can act as an abrasive. When it breaks down, it gives carbon dioxide, which is not a problem no matter what people in the climate change nonsense want to consider. And the silver ion actually acts as an antibiotic. So if you do have stuff going on in your teeth, that'll reduce population growths. But I wonder if we considered ourselves a population growth of a whole lot of things that are in the human body that are in and of themselves living entities, that maybe we can take care better of our bodies, feel better, and that'll help our entire mental state.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of silent nutrient that we don't get that causes problems in our mental state. One of the things I see in healthcare, and that's missing in even the best nutrition, like what you're saying, you can use silver as a natural, type of antibiotic in your toothpaste to help, if you have an infection or something else that's going on. And you can use these. One of the things that, I recommend, Roger Spur's big on that too, is the mud fossil guy, because of carbon. It turns out like things like castor oil have a ton of, carbon in them. And so they actually get rid of pain. So you saturate a cloth, you wipe, you wrap it over the area for a couple hours. You do that for a little duration, and then you start to notice your pain goes away. Even if you've had like a majorly fractured foot, or you have tendonitis or whatever else. And then basically what it is that the castor oil, as it goes into the body, it delivers positive carbon. And positive carbon is not something that we get in our environment anymore. Positive carbon we would be eating in from, like if we were living off the land and it had full microbial, beautiful soil and plants and everything, it would be constantly off-gassing, positive carbon. And so we were breathing that in our lungs, our skin would breathe it in, we'd be eating it, we'd probably be stepping on it with our feet, our hands would be in it, and we would be absorbing it. And this positive carbon actually helps the bones to basically not ache. And even if you have broken bones or other problems, you shouldn't really have physical pain. So, your physical pain is because you don't have a relationship to the soil and the earth and in places where there's a lot of positive carbon. That's why now there's like this new movement. It cracked me up. There's like a spiritual name for it, where people, actively go out and hike in the forest to get their, positive carbons and things like that. It's how it should be. We should be living that way. We should be living in nature, in the nature of things.
Yeah, I think I learned that sometime around 1980 when I moved from Pennsylvania to Oregon. And in fact, I should let your listeners know a little bit about my pedigree, because I do have a pedigree that allows me to talk about chemistry on a world stage. I went to a place called Washington and Jefferson College in Washington, Pennsylvania, and then went to Oregon State University, and then went back to Boston and went to Brandeis University, and then moved off to West Virginia University, and then got tired enough of universities and could see that that wasn't going to go where I wanted it to go. So I dipped out into the real world and went to work for NASA, never a straight answer agency. And then I went into the mining industry, and then I worked at a zoo in education. And all that time I taught college and also dabbled in politics. So I was a pretty happy camper. But it didn't help other people for me to be a happy camper. In the world that goes, if you're a happy camper, everybody else is supposed to make your life miserable. So we went through that period of time and woke up in a metaphysical universe in Ashland, Oregon, which is a lot like places like Sedona or Santa Cruz, where people are elevated by spirituality, and the spirituality is really part of their own egos. But, feeling good about yourself doesn't have to come at the cost of making somebody else feel bad about themselves. And after I left Ashland, I started traveling the West Coast, and that's when I ran into Bridgette. And I guess we met in Reno when Rick and Matt were making a presentation. And for anybody who wants to know how to do anything that we're talking about from the old days, Matt Stein's book, When Technology Fails, is one of the best books that you could keep on your bookshelf. It tells you how to make furniture. It tells you how to make oil lamps. It tells you how to
Palladial silver, everything, how to make a shelter, how to clean water.
Yeah. I mean, if you need one book to take with you for making it into future life, I want Matt's book. And so, of course, the most prepared person is the one who is no longer with us. Rest in peace, Matt. We miss you.
Yeah. That was a whole weird thing with Matt's death. Whole weird thing that went on. All right. So, so Lenny is a bona fide, East Coast chemist, from those East Coast colleges.
Yeah, it means that when people start poo-pooing other people for not having proper credentials, they're making a mockery of it.
We just lost you.
You don't need the credentials. Am I not here?
Yeah, you just kind of blipped out for a minute. Now you're back.
Good. What I want to point out is that the credentials don't mean anything. It's the quality of the knowledge that you know, and you only get that quality of knowledge by spending the time thinking about what you're doing and asking the right questions. So even though Bridgette doesn't have a lot of letters after her name formally, she has more of an encyclopedia knowledge that when I need something that I need to know, I know I can ask Bridgette and get a straight answer in just about any area where she has expertise in. And so the fact that the plants don't require us to have letters after our name in order to tend them is a very good thing. I get along well with my plants.
I know. Well, Lenny used to be a brown thumb back when I was doing some farming building, and Lenny would be like, "Oh no, I can't grow plants. I have a brown thumb." And I'm like, "No, you can do this. You can do this." And now he's like turned into like a green thumb, right? Now it's like, what can you not grow?
Yeah, I took a dozen seeds, actually 13, a baker's dozen, and wrapped them in a cloth with a little bit of water and got them germinated, and went ahead and planted 6 in eggshells and the other 7 in just pots. And when I did my survey, I have 9 out of 13 plants going right now. So
what kind of plants are they?
Marijuana.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So how are the ones doing in the eggshells? Did you grind up the eggshells, or are you just growing them in eggshells? Or is there any soil in it or anything? Is it just egg?
No, it's the eggshell having been broken and eaten that morning with some of the compost from one of the compost piles that I have around here.
Oh, a transplant. You made like a little transplant.
Right. And it's going into a pot in the next day or two because the eggshell has this little tiny plant in it, and the planters have slightly bigger tiny plants in it. So I can tell that the roots are already bound within the eggshell. What I'll do is either make a bigger hole in the bottom of the eggshell and plant the whole thing into more dirt and let it go from there. Or I'll crush the eggshell in the dirt that I'm planting it in. Yeah.
So how about a couple of transplanter tips? I would be careful about, how severe I would get on the eggshell. So roots. Okay. So the roots of a plant and the bottom part of the stem, they don't like human hormones. It can make the plant do weird things chemically, which means, it may even, force it to bolt, not really grow properly, or, grow seeds really fast, or maybe not grow seeds. But so the more that we physically touch the stem or the roots, kind of, we add our human hormones into the plant, and that can make it kind of really confused, and not in the long term do what, we desire it to do. So we want to avoid when, even when we are pulling the stem out of, say, a container with its roots, you got to be really careful about not grabbing the base of that stem or touching the roots when you put it into the ground and transplant it. That way you won't, well, it's like science, right? You won't get your DNA all over it, right? contaminate the sample. But, things like putting the seed in your mouth and, carrying it around in your mouth for 15 to 20 minutes or even an hour, so that the seed can maybe take data from your DNA, or maybe take understanding from your body in a way.
Past. I didn't do that with these seeds this time, though.
Yes, but that way, the seed might be inclined to grow medicine that is more predisposed for your particular, what you need as far as nutrition or medicine, or if you have an illness. But you don't want to contaminate the stem or the roots. But if I had a little eggshell that I had a little plant in, I would just take like something and just tap the bottom in a way to, mash the eggshells a little bit, so that I could just put the whole thing in the ground. And the roots will get big enough where they'll puncture through that area. But I'd be really careful just about, taking the shell off or whatever else, because the more that you can make the root happy. And, when I first got into growing things, I got into this whole, I call it the landscaping period, where landscapers, or, things that you learn from kind of the landscaping stuff, is like you go buy, these trays of flowers that are rooted in containers, and you pull them out by their root, and then you take their roots and you rip them and kind of, you butterfly them with your hands, and then you put them in the hole, and then you plant them, so that it forces the, flower to expand, opening their roots up, kind of a philosophy, which I found is like, not what the plant is going to like.
Okay.
And you bust open some of the mycelium, right, that it's already started, you know what I mean, to get involved with what's going on with the plant and the roots.
Yeah, I was actually planning to treat a couple of the eggshells differently to compare, since I have 6 plants in eggshells, and I only plan to have 4 plants total in the end that I take out. But what happened was, last year I had 5 plants going, and all 5 of them turned out to be male. So I harvested them real early, and I melted them down into canna butter. And so it's a good CBD-based canna butter based on the male plant. But then over the winter, I inherited some marijuana from a friend who had passed away, and it all worked out in the wash, so that I had just the same as if I'd grown my own. Funny how that works, isn't it?
It is. It is.
I think the most important thing that people can believe is to believe in themselves and their own belief system. And that if you believe in yourself and what you believe, and require other people to give you a valid, rational argument before you change your mind and believe something else, you're way, way better than just, oh, that sounds good, I think I'll believe it. And then you get down the road and it turns out to not be real. But one of the things that happens when we assume that nothing's real until it's proved is we don't get to use things that are real but not provable. And that the burden of proof for what's asked within the society anymore is such that the science burden of proof is running it by some people who call themselves experts in a peer review. And X means former, and we both know what a spurt is, right? So the fact that science advances one death at a time and only promotes the death culture means that the whole extent of the living earth is there for us to explore. And if everything that is made of carbon or has a vibration is considered alive, well, now we have a lot more explanation room that we can count on beyond the confines of current time and space, but still different enough that it gives us room for expansion. Now, as I said earlier, I think we're going to go into 3 years where they're going to release 100 years of technology in the area of space. This is not newly invented stuff. This is old stuff that they used to know, but they just forgot to teach so that people forget about it. And then when they roll it out, it's all brand new. But the important thing is going to be in communications. And the communication ability that we have as individuals today is already way, way greater than any individuals have ever had on Earth. And it's getting better. But that communications of information has led to overload so that we have forgotten simple things like common sense and civil decency. And so I think that the system works just fine, but the rewards of the system penalize people who do good stuff and really, really promote people who have the worst intention at all. So that it's a matter of redistributing wealth and changing the reward system, because no matter how you redistribute the wealth, if it's the same reward system, we're going to get the same results.
Yeah.
So any more news on the new world reward system, or is that in stasis?
I don't know. Just really hasn't been a whole lot of, information about it. Well, every time there's like a major expansion of information, then it seems like it goes like the switch is flipped off, right? And it goes into a dormant stage. So, it's kind of I don't know. I think a lot of the stuff that's going on right now hasn't reached, if we want to try to put our finger on it, hasn't really hit the 100th monkeys thing yet.
Yeah, we talked about some stuff about a year ago about getting to a certain point and the integrity's not in the system, so they have to stop and work it backward to find out where the integrity was broken, to then work it back forward to get to the same point again. So I'm guessing that they said something and the integrity of the information was bad. And so now they have to go back and look at some of the premises and figure out what changed. And we're going to have to do that on human scale anyway. Because the thing about water being the seat of intelligence, if you think because of your water and not because of your brain or your heart or your gut, wouldn't that change paradigms of how to act?
Yeah.
And what the role of every different thing in the body is. But, when you go back into that system I talked about from Armando, the Tree system, it's based on 8 different concepts that if you string them in order and permute them, make a great 64-day calendar. And in 64 days, you have enough time to put intention into a project that you can get the whole project done and know you've accomplished something.
Well, I think that's the whole issue is, like in shamanism, a lot of the really traditional stuff is about getting to the fourth attention and, and past that. And that intention, so you have to have an intention to hold your attention for a long period of time in order to, bring it from start to finish. I mean, it's like kind of like the basis of what people would call manifestation, you know what I mean? But a lot of, I think, what's going on in the world, and, maybe if there are positive changes going on or whatever is happening, it's just people can't hold their attention long enough.
We should call it manifestation.
Hey, I love that. That's a new word, manifestation. Serious.
Well, what your brain dwells on is what you get. And if people continue to dwell on the negative, they just bring more negative into their surroundings. So the trick is to not ignore the negative, but just not attach yourself to the negative or the positive. And by having that step back and be non-attached perspective, it doesn't matter how the result works as long as the effort was put there with intention.
Mm-hmm.
And so this radio show, for instance, turned out to be a very good show because we knew the topic we wanted to talk about 4 days ago. And I was able to think more about what I wanted to say. And that led me to some technical advances that allow me to reframe how the human body works as a water being with an organic scaffolding structure, where the scaffolding provides the mechanics to do the oxidation reduction that provides the energy. Now, the energy comes at different frequencies. The frequencies each have their own wavelengths, but we only seem to think about wavelengths in terms of light, and we're missing a lot of the spectrum when we only think about frequencies as light. But light and heat have totally different mechanisms by which they function, and half of life is light, half of life is heat, and that balance tends to go in a yin and yang of 60-40, and you can see that from the Fibonacci ratio. So if you don't know how something's going to work out, do it 13 times, and 7 or 8 times it'll be one way, and 4 or 5 times it'll be another way, and once it'll be very, very strange, a different way. And it's those very, very strange, different ways that we need to pursue.
There's this really crazy story, and I actually think, I can't really remember a lot of the significant details, but I believe that it actually may have happened in one of the universities close to here, or if not Reno, I can't remember. But I was reading a article about this scientist. He had been working on sheetgrass. Sheetgrass is, we see the sheetgrass that's kind of taking over, and it's not good for fires, but we see it a lot in the desert. We used to just have sagebrush and rabbit brush and different kinds of brush, but now we're starting to see this weird grass that grows kind of in the spring and then it dries really fast. And I think the sheetgrass actually came from like Europe or something like that. So in the US, they've been trying to kill it because it's become very, like aggressive, right? And kind of really taken over. Wherever it goes, it takes over. And so there was a scientist guy in university who was working on sheetgrass for 25 years. And over the 25 years, they would keep changing like the DNA structure of it. They'd put stuff in it, take stuff out, trying to get the sheetgrass to become something different so it wasn't so evasive, or they could figure out what they could create to actually stop it in a way to, on large scale. Anyway, so after 25 years, like the most strange event happened right? They were always kind of getting, like the same results of all the different kinds of experiments that they were doing on the sheetgrass. But after 25 years, the scientists went down into the lab, to work on the sheetgrass. Mind you, he's probably there 9 to 5, Monday through Friday for the last 25 years, working with his trays of sheetgrass. And what had happened after 25 years when he walked into the lab is that he noticed that the sheetgrass was like different, but he wasn't sure what was different about it, right? It's strange. It was strange. He wasn't sure what was strange about it. So he, took a whole bunch of samples, did like DNA profile, blah, 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 stuck it under the microscope, and what he saw like almost made him fall off his chair. Basically, the sheetgrass had had enough of all the experimenting, and it actually returned itself to the exact original self that it was 25 years prior.
That is exactly like flipping 8 heads on a coin in a row. It's got to happen sometime, but for it to have enough permutations for all the sequence of events to happen the right way to allow it to manifest itself is a matter of control of structure. But you can almost liken it exactly to the work of Dr. Emoto and his work with water and crystals, which is still one of the most lucid expressions of how consciousness manifests itself in matter than anything that's been done since. And Dr. Emoto is slowly slipping away from the public viewpoint because now that he's passed, they don't want his information out. And
also he was and so my teacher Bobido, who passed in June 2016, him and Emoto worked together, and whenever Yellowstone would start to pressurize, Bobido was one of the keepers, the elders that helped to release it or take care of it, doing ceremony and stuff. And Emoto would actually come with Bobido. But a lot of these people, and Emoto would, it's kind of a cute story, and Emoto would, imprint the water. Do you know what I mean? With the way that he worked with water to help Bobido, in order to help the caldera not blow, right, and kill everybody worldwide. And so one time Bobido said to Emoto, hey, dude, you should learn some of the other ceremonies, and then you could work with the healing the earth and all this other stuff. And he said that Emoto said, no, Bobido, I only work with water. I only do the water. That's what he would say. But and so a lot of these people that were holding some of this stuff about the work with the water, or have severely been disappeared. Even Victor Schallenberg, you can find a lot of this stuff on YouTube, but it's a lot of people's impression of what Schallenberg might have been saying. They sort of attacked him. Yeah. Or, they think that they've bettered his work by putting their spin on it and then, putting it out and not really showcasing his work and exactly what that work was about. And basically, the coolest thing about Schallenberger that I really, really liked was that his impression of everything was the opposite. So, when we're doing like in Steiner's work or Rudolf Steiner's work, if I'm studying, birds, well, birds, for the most part,
sit at the two, but we sometimes forget that we live in a polar universe.
Well, no, birds have relationships with water and air, but their bodies look like hulls of ships. If you get down to the structure, right, or what you call the scaffolding. The scaffolding is created to be flown or be swammed or to. Oh, I just lost him again. Hold on a second. Uh-oh. Hopefully he's not having trouble again. Hold on. We're bringing him back. All right. So, uh-oh. I guess Skype just doesn't really like, it doesn't like Lenny today for some reason. We have like 20 minutes left. And it looks like, hey, are you there? Hello? Uh-oh, let's see what he's got. Oh, there you are. Are you there? Hello? It says you're with us, but I can't hear you. Your picture is there. Lenny, can you hear me? I can't hear you, though. All right, well, let's see what happens. I might have to recall Lenny. Oh, Lenny's mic is muted. Hey, Lenny, your mic is muted. Let me see if I can fix that. I can't. Oh, here, wait. Let me see. Let me mute, and then let me unmute you. Whoops, he dropped off again. Okay, hold on a second. Let me try to get him back on. Hold on. I'll just do what I did last time. I just kept calling him until until he got on the show. But anyway, one of the things that I really like about Victor Schallenberger's work, since in biodynamics he was around the same time frame and had are you there? Can you hear me? Hello? Talk. I can't hear you talking, so yeah. I can't hear you talking, Mr. Lenny. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of go on until we figure out what's going on here with Lenny and him being on the show or not being on the show, to be on the show or to not be on the show. But one of the things I really liked about, oh, there he goes. Let me call him again. One of the things that I really, really liked, I'm going to call him back, about Victor Schallenberger's work is that it was the opposite of what our science has, kind of like told us about. Are you there?
I don't know. Am I here?
Yeah, you're here. But anyway, I was explaining about what I really liked about Victor Schallenberger. And the other thing, too, is like we don't really have a language to support his work. And so one of the things that he said is that through a study of water and like how fish are built, right, or birds or other things that, can land on water or, float on water, he said that, that they were designed, to have a relationship with water, and fish don't swim. He said they are swammed. The water swims them. So the water has natural propulsions and different things that are going on in the river, and it helps to support the design of the fish to what appears to that we've been told is that the fish swims when it's the water that is swimming the fish. And the air, and the air being where birds have hulls of ships, and the way that their sails are, that they are made that way, they are designed that way to be flown by the air. And then the birds learn to build a relationship with the air force, the air element around it. And then once they have figured it out, that it's pretty much effortless for them because their bodies are designed to be flown by the air. Like the
I got an image of a bird in an Air Force uniform. Air Force. It just cracked me up too. Schauberger used to have flow forms there, where the one municipality in Germany near the Switzerland, or in Switzerland near Germany, had 8 Schauberger ponds that fed each other with flow forms that went from any level of pollution you could imagine down to clear, drinkable drinking water with no chemicals, no added work, just by flowing the water around.
Yeah, and there is still a official, Steiner farming, community in parts of Europe that do the exact design of the original flow forms that you can buy. And in the US and Australia, biodynamic farmers are huge about putting you can do a 1-tier or you can do a 12-tier connector of the flow forms, and then you can make like a staircase where the water flows down.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the stuff that Schauberger ran into was that at the time when he was doing his research, he was unknown, left alone, and able to think for himself and get a lot done. When he came out, he got attacked by the academics who were not as good as he was in research and didn't have a clue as to the depth of his understanding, but he was a forester, not a scientist, and he was also not a businessman, and he got taken advantage of big time. And so the work he did on implosion energy is another one of those hidden things. Everybody knows that the only way to get rid of excess energy is explosion, except it's not. There's a whole world of implosion, but that's been taken offline and out of limits. And I think that's one of the things they'll introduce to us when they get to levitation to beat gravity, is that they've already got it down based on Schauberger's work with the reserpine. But, that's all hidden stuff. And now that on my radio show, we're spending Thursday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, people can come and listen to a reading from a British orator reading The Secret Teaching of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And to listen to the stories that Manly P. Hall has been telling about astronomy and mathematics. And this week we did Pythagoras. And Pythagoras has that theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, that's fundamental to geometry. But there's so much more to the understanding of life through the terms that Pythagoras developed, that it wasn't until I heard Manly P. Hall's rendition that I realized how much more all over the place this man was than I ever gave him credit for. But it seems to me that we've had history altered to add time that doesn't exist in, and that time is called the Dark Ages, and there's a couple of stories that sort of puff at it, but we better find that missing 1,000 years. In fact, I don't think anything. I think there's a whole thing going on that Roger's onto, Roger Spur from Mud Fossils University. And I think that the size of the giants he's finding are people who live in a different dimension of time, but that's us from a size scale that's different. So that when we dig up these fossils that are actually collections of human metabolized organic matter, we're developing something that has been known all along but hidden from us. And so now we've got new history coming through with Tartaria, but there's enough false inserted into the true to not only make that history seem insane, but to make the current history that we're living by seem insane as well. So if we go back to a time previous to World War II and ask what was happening, I think we get some different answers than what we've been told.
Yeah. Well, going back to the water and Victor Schallenberger, and a lot of that stuff you can read, and it kind of changes your mind, but it's the moment that you actually, work the process of it, right? Or you examine it yourself. And I have to tell people out there that there was this farm, because I was involved, I went to the college, took different courses and took the certification for biodynamic sort of farming. And a lot of, other stuff at Rudolf Steiner. I also became a member of the BDANC, which is Northern California Biodynamics Association, where they had the quarterly meetings. And then that's where you really go and you really, spend the whole weekend. You usually have people who come and lecture. You do plant studies. You make, a lot of the preparations, the medicines, and the traditional fashion of Steiner's work. One time, there was this farm that was in Anderson Valley that's along the coast below Mendocino, and I was there the year before Fukushima, which I'm glad about because I would have never gone there and did a farming apprenticeship under under Fukushima these days. But so I was down there. We got invited to do I think it was the summer meeting, and it's around yarrow and preparations of yarrow. And so everything yarrow. But this particular farm that had been built like over about 25 years, and they were 100% vegan. So even their compost, they used algae from this big pond in these underground cisterns that were, like certain kinds of shapes that would actually help with the breaking down. So there was a huge amount of really traditional Steiner work and Victor Schallenberger's work that went on this farm. But the whole farm was fruit, pretty much, that they actually sold. They sold 10 different types of blueberries to San Francisco during the blueberry seasons. But they had all of this stuff that was inspired with water and the design of the farm. And what was so mind-blowing about the whole thing is that they used these vortexes. So it was gravity fed into these vortexes. These vortexes started on the top of this hill. There was about 8 of them. So there was 2 on the top either side. Then you walk down the hill, and there's 8 total. So the gravity would fill into them. They would spiral in different directions, and then it would be released to the next ones and the next ones and the next ones. And then it would be put out into the field on the crops. And so they also had some, free forms of, flow forms that the water would go through and feed the whole area. And it was a huge farm, and only 9 people took care of this farm. And it was a beautiful, and it was immaculate. It was one of those places that, unless they had the biodynamic meeting and that I had been a member, you're never going to be allowed on this farm. They do not allow anybody onto the farm for any purpose at all. So what happened was that when they started to use ideas of Victor Schallenberger's work, they found that when they flow formed or vorticide the water, that they would only need a quarter of the water that they were using previously for the whole farm. And it was huge. It was all fruit as far as the eye could see. And that's pretty significant because, they said that what they were doing is the way that they felt about it, the people on the farm, is that they, through Victor Schallenberger's work and vorticeing the water and flow forming the water, that they were actually returning the spirit back to the water. And that water that came up through your pipes in your house was considered tapped liquid. It was a liquid, but it wasn't really water because it didn't have the structure and the makeup of water. And and what water needed to be itself, which is, the oxygenation process and the structure and the chaos and, and all these different kinds of components that went into it, like it would be flowing down a creek or a river.
Yeah, and it wasn't until I actually spent the time sitting in the river here and not having anything that I wanted to do other than sit in the river to cool off that I was actually able to look at the generation of vortexes and back eddies and learn that the river doesn't flow from upstream to downstream. It flows all over the place and looks for different ways that it can move things to flow in other places. So there's definitely a collective intelligence there in the flowing water that is also activated by the shungite. Shungite in water seems to activate water the same way that pouring water does. And I got into a habit of using my woo-wee device the Wu Wei is a plastic device that spins the water so that after I distill my drinking water, I pour it through the Wu Wei, activated it, and then keep it stored over shungite in gallon glass bottles. And even now, right now, as we're talking, I've got a gallon of water outside distilling, and I'll distill a gallon or two water every day to just keep up with my needs. By using clean, pure, distilled, activated water, I think I've helped my biochemistry and my personal health immensely.
Yeah, no, because you are water. So if you're either conscious water or you're tap liquid, which one do you want to be? All right, so we're at the end of the show. Lenny, thank you so much for coming on close. Where can people find you?
People can find me on the New Way radio show on Steampunk Radio, which you can find on your TuneIn app, or Steam it at Lenny Thyme, or Out of Minds OOM2.com, which Bridgette can tell you more about.
Yeah, well, we both contribute on there on that website. So, but anyway, all right, everybody, thanks so much. It's been a super great show. Thank you, Lenny, for coming on, and I will see you next week. Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. All right, have a great week, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Welcome to Revolution Radio, where you, the listeners, are in charge. Here at Revolution Radio, we present 48 broadcast hours of news and information each and every day. Revolution Radio never sleeps. Revolution Radio is worldwide and borderless information. Revolution Radio is also commercial-free. Revolution Radio is supported 100% by you, the listeners. And that's why we appeal to you to donate and support this station and its expenses. You can support us in many available options like archive subscriptions, our seed pack selections, or even my woodworking store. And we also even have Revolution Radio's swag at the Revolution Radio Zazzle store, in which you can get t-shirts, coffee cups, even a baby onesie. Or you can just plain donate to the cause. We cannot continue without your support, and your support is what helps pay the bills. So please, if you wish us to continue, please stop by our station support page and drop a dime on us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. Your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank or all the bank